Welcome back. Let us start Session 2, Panel Discussion 2, Solution Provider and Avoided Emissions. The facilitator of this session is Ms. Hayashi Reiko, Director and Deputy President, BofA Securities Japan Company Limited. Ms. Hayashi, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for introduction. Again, my name is Reiko Hayashi. I work for Bank of America or BofA Securities Japan. Please let me explain briefly the background of this session named Solution Provider and Avoided Emissions. These days, companies are expected to be a solution provider. It means that companies are expected to create value by contributing to solving social challenges through their own business activities. Consequently, it is essential to build a mechanism so that companies are not only to reduce negative impacts, but also to make positive impacts proactively by perceiving social issues as new business opportunities. As for climate change, GHG emissions are now regarded as a risk factor affecting the competitiveness of companies. And the increase of the attention on GHG emission reductions through company supply chain has led to developing its assessment measurement, scope 1, 2, 3, as you know. However, this measurement is said to be insufficient to evaluate the element of companies' contribution as a solution provider. We may need another mechanism, another measurement mechanism to assess companies' contributions to society. This mechanism would inspire private companies to make climate actions more proactively. This new mechanism is the basic concept of avoided emissions. Please show the screen. Solution, next, oh, okay, I have to do it. Okay, this is a concept of avoided emissions, okay? And currently, the measurement methodology of avoided emissions are under developing. Methodology will eventually become one of the relevant evaluation criteria for financial sectors as well. Okay, so scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and avoided emissions. And as you have seen, active discussion on this subject, as you know, WBSCD published its first guideline in March this year. As well, G7 hosted by Japan this year also recognized the value of the avoided emissions. This topic has been discussed at GX League in Japan as well. And IEC, Ms. Hiruta is also representing, is also considering the standardization of avoided emissions. She will talk about that later. Today, I'm so excited to hear more about these initiatives from these distinguished panelists. Panasonic, Veolia, and then Schneider, and Nomura Asset Management from financial sector, who have been leading discussion actively. With that, please let me start the discussion. First question to all. What sort of mechanism do we need to assess private company solution providing capability? Okay, so let's get started from Mr. Get started with Mr. Uehara, please.
Okay, thank you, Hayashi-san. I'm Hirotoshi Uehara. I'm in charge of the quality and the environment for entire Panasonic. So I think the avoided emission is one of the candidates. Before starting discussion, please allow me to explain the definition of avoided emission. Avoided emission accounts the difference between GHG emission that occur or will occur with a solution and the reference scenario, which shows GHG emission that would have occurred without solution. The avoided emission and the traditional GHG inventory are two very different concepts. So it's not possible to use avoided emission to offset GHG inventory. avoided emission attempt to assess the company's contribution to reduce GHG emission as a society, which would accelerate decarbonization, we believe. We also scientific evidences that avoided emission would assist to reach decarbonization. One such example is that the Wright Research Institute of Innovative Technology for the Earth simulator, which is also used in IPCC climate change scenario development. Now, Light and Earth are beginning to validate the innovation that contribute to emission reduction by other businesses are effective in achieving the 1.5-degree scenario pathway. And we, Panasonic, has pledged that from 2022 to 2050, it will reduce 100 million tons of its own GHG emission and contribute to 200 million tons reduction as avoided emission. In total, we, Panasonic, aims to contribute 300 million tons worth climate impact. This is our current vision, so-called Panasonic Green Impact. We are currently participating in the WBCSD, IEC, and GX Week, and have been working with government departments and companies with similar aspiration to advance the discussion on the need for reduction contribution volume. A topic of that, we have disclosed avoided emission at our sustainability data book in this year. The avoided emission have high degree of uncertainty in calculation method and have not been international standardized yet. However, based on the guidance of WBCSD and GX Week, as well as the discussion at the IEC, which is aiming for international standardization, we, Panasonic, managed to disclose transparently. We will continue to report progress as a sign that we are accelerating business transformation and growth by enhancing our competitiveness of our product and services that contribute to CO2 emission reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Uehara. Panasonic has been always quite passionate to introduce new concepts in Japan as well, working with international market participants. And then, okay, so Jason from financial sector, could you give your thoughts?
Sure, thanks very much. So I'm Jason Mortimer here with Nomura Asset Management, heading up sustainable investing for fixed income here in Tokyo. And I think what we can really hear from some of the speakers so far, is the providing of solutions to the climate, challenges that we face. And if you kind of zoom out a little bit, what is the role of the market? What is the role of the investor here? Our role and our ability is to, identify risks, price capital for efficiency, allocate capital for efficiency, and also, uncover those opportunities that are available to us so that we can deliver returns to our investors. And, if you think about it, scope 1, 2, and 3 reductions, the company's own reduction efforts is obviously hugely important, and we know that for net zero to be achieved, those are the numbers that are going to have to go to zero, and that is something that we are very focused on. But if you also think about it from another perspective, there's what we can do through efficiency in the near term, and we can cut costs or make things more efficient, and that's obviously a win for everybody. But there are certain limits that we face. And I think also, if you really think about it, investors are motivated by opportunity, finding what is going to be the growth market, where can we invest, to deliver returns. And that is one I think that is really interesting on the avoided emissions side, because just like we don't just use, balance sheet numbers or, assets and liabilities or just the, profit and loss statements to evaluate a company, but rather we want to have a holistic view of all the risks and opportunities that are there, so we can value that company, we can kind of price that risk effectively. And I think that by doing that, we can actually do our best to kind of push companies to provide those solutions. And if you could just bring up the slide that we have prepared here, I'd like to show you kind of in my idea of how this works. So think about kind of as we investors, not only looking for opportunities to invest in, but I think also in the net zero investment world, we also need to be thinking about how do we kind of achieve that next level, that next unit of carbon reduction most efficiently, kind of thinking about the total costs, right? So if you'll follow me along with this kind of slide that I've put together, there are certain direct reduction efforts, right, in scope 1, scope 2, and 3. What a company can do on its own to reduce GHG. That may be replacing fossil fuel generation with solar and wind. That may be implementing and rolling out electric vehicles so people can replace fossil fuel powered vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. But there is we know, a limit to that, and even though those technologies themselves may be falling in cost at the direct use level, but there are certain other supply bottlenecks we can see. We can see this kind of coming up. I mean, just in recent times in the UK with some failed auctions for offshore wind, it was quite interesting that wind power there in that case is not necessarily the limiting factor to rolling out that solution, but rather what I learned was that in fact the company that is in fact making the cables to connect the offshore wind power generators to the mainland to get that power and to make use of it, they're booked out until 2030. Right? So where do we as investors find that next marginal unit of GHG reduction at the lowest cost, and which may then be the opportunity for us? So what I kind of see is how these two, scope 1, scope 2 and 3 reductions, as well as avoided emissions metrics, how do they kind of play out? They're obviously different concepts, but we could kind of follow this line. If we had that data as investors, we could then be allocating to those projects, to those companies that are delivering the lowest cost reduction at all times to keep driving us to that net zero goal. And I think that's why we need something like net zero, avoided emissions, and the enabling technology, to find that enabling technology, those innovations, the companies that are doing that, really to keep allocating capital efficiently.
Thank you very much. Your company has been leading the concept of the avoided emissions and other elements in this space. And then I don't know whether other financial industries have agreed on it, but your comments are very powerful. Okay, thank you very much. And then Hiruta-san from Schneider, and then also convener from IEC.
Thank you, Reiko-san. So could you please share my slide? Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Takako Hiruta from Schneider Electric Japan. I'm the convener of the ICTC 111 Working 17 Greenhouse Gas. The next, should be, I do. Okay. So please let me explain about Schneider Electric briefly. So we are a technology company providing energy and automation digital solution for electricity, efficiency and sustainability for our customers around the world. We are the 34 billion euro revenue company with 128,000 employees in over 100 countries. We have two key businesses, energy management and industrial automation. We are balanced the company in terms of our end market and geographies. We serve customers in 4 end markets: building, data center, industry, and infrastructure. So in 2021, we were recognized by Corporate Knights at the World Economic Forum as the most sustainable company in the world across all industries. Okay. We've committed to net zero. We've taken strong commitment. We are on way to achieving those commitments. Our net zero target has been validated by the Science Based Target Initiative, SBTi, and this our company's carbon pledge. First, we reduce scope 1, 2, 3 greenhouse gas emission. Looking at the long-term commitment, Schneider Electric is no less ambitious. Schneider is engaging with the suppliers toward a net zero supply chain by 2050 with no carbon CO2 offset. And besides our scope 1, 2, 3 emission reduction, we aim to save or avoid 800 million tons CO2 emissions to the customer for 8 years from 2018 to 2025 through our product, service, and the solution. This is a positive impact to our customer and the world. Okay. So we disclose our sustainability report and climate report on our website. You can see the saved and avoided emission target as a Schneider Sustainability Impact Goal number 2. So we publish this SSI result quarterly. So to accelerate CO2 emission reduction is to shorten the transition time to decarbonization. While we act more climate positively, it is important to make a social mechanism to encourage business and support financially, both for the providers and the users. So, okay. So saved and avoided emission reflect how much our product, service, and solution can help transform our customer decarbonizing journey. Schneider Electric distinguishes between avoided emission and saved emission. Avoided emission arise from the new installation, emissions are less increasing. And whereas saved emissions are reduction as compared to the past. For both cases, we must consider induced emission on the expected lifetime of the offer and covering the full life cycles. When we calculate saved and avoided emission, as the slide shows, we compare induced emissions of reference situation and those from Schneider offer. What is the reference situation? Why do we need to set a reference situation? We must compare these emission reduction apple to apple. Therefore, our reference situation represents the most realistic market situation in the absence of the sales of our offer. Which brings me to the next point. When we proposed the standardization of avoided emission at the ICTC111 plenary in 2019, there were various ways to communicate and calculate avoided emission. To avoid greenwashing, we would like to unify the definition of avoided emission and provide guidance and the requirement to calculate and communicate in the industry. So this is we are on the way to the standardization. While ISO and WBCSD guidance can be applied to all industries, IC 63372 is applied to the electric and electronic industries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I appreciate your effort, not only working on behalf of Schneider, but also the industry itself. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So now we understand that the avoided emission concept is very important, but it's still underway. And then what are necessary steps to promote avoided emissions?
Sure, yeah. I mean, again, remember, we need to think about what is this data for. It's not just data for data's sake. And let's actually think about not just what this is not, but also what is the positive vision of the future that we're trying to achieve through this. And that, again, is really to find the value and properly value these companies based not just on their reduction efforts, but also, in some cases, the value there, the opportunity may be in how they can help others to more efficiently reduce their efforts. I mean, with a company like Veolia or waste management, when we will actually see that from a reduction efforts perspective is, I mean, there's a lot of risk there, right? There's a lot of emissions embedded there. There's a lot of water risk, a lot of other kinds of risks. But actually the value of what this company is doing and what they're actually achieving is actually to help others reduce their risks. So even though the individual projects for a company like that, may in fact be, additive to emissions on their own, but rather if they're helping, a huge number of other companies and entities reduce their emissions by 50 or 90%, just using some examples, then we should actually value that from a holistic perspective. And that's great for us as investors because there's probably going to be a lot of demand for such services. Everyone else is going to be facing those pressures and thinking, how can I reduce emissions and reduce waste and climate impacts at the most efficient cost? So we want to find those types of companies that can provide that service. And I think avoided emissions is really a key metric to find them. Thank you.
Well, in order for financial sectors to analyze the data and then also find the holistic, to have a holistic approach to evaluate the companies, both sides need to elaborate or to be more sophisticated in terms of data providing and also data analyzing, and then also data itself. And then in order to avoid greenwashing, we need further discussion among all the stakeholders. That's my view, because still some people are confused about GHG protocol and then avoided emissions and so on. So we need more efforts to make this happen.
Definitely. I mean, just to one more quick jump in is to say, just like we rely on consistent financial data and reporting and metrics, and now including many forms of sustainability data, we need consistent frameworks to compare between avoided emissions. The real power of this type of indicator could be if we could compare, like for like, apples for apples, a Panasonic or a Schneider Electric or whoever it is, based on not just the reduction efforts that they're doing, and we can count those accurately, but also how much CO2 are they reducing through their products and services, maybe let's say on a dollar invested or yen invested basis, then we can take that information and say, hey, I want to, let's say, maximize the amount of total emissions that I can save, not just through reduction efforts, but also through reduction efforts and avoided emissions efforts. How can I maximize that per dollar invested? And I think that could be a very powerful and kind of a consistent metric for us on the market side to use, again, to allocate capital efficiently.
Yeah, comparability and transparency are always the keys for financial institutions to be accountable, I would say. Okay, so going to Hirota-san, could you give your thoughts? What kind of steps we need further?
Okay, could you please share my slide? Okay, thank you. So this is the IC63372 CD2 summary. So this is the index. So the 6.3 is the avoided emission, the main point. So now we are discussing the requirement and the guidance about the GIS point. And actually, so the main key point to determine the quantification of the avoided emission. So calculation method, and the second, the time period, over which it is calculated, and the baseline scenario. The other was different situation. So these 3 points should be discussed and clarified into the requirement and guidance. And then a baseline scenario is set considering the time period in which the product, service, and the system will be used. In reality, so to set the baseline scenario is very, very difficult, because so we need to know the considering our long and complex supply chain. So we should consider the electrical components and our solutions. So these are the, how to say, the more we try to calculate accurate and consistent and conservative, so the more the calculation is challenging. So, so we try to set what is the requirement, what is the guidance. So this is our in the way to the standardization. Okay. Okay, this is a schedule to publish the IC standard. So we are trying to publish the next draft for voting early next year. If the voting passes, then so IC standard can move to the next stage, final draft of international standard. So we are trying to publish the international standard in 2024, next year. So after the publish our standard, we would like to promote the communicate with other industry to accelerate the mutual comprehension of the avoided emission, how to calculate and how to communicate the avoided emission. Thank you.
End of 2024. It's quite aggressive target. Are you confident to complete it, if I may ask you?
Thank you very much. So let me share my screen, okay? The last page, yeah. So now we are on the CD2. So we just received a comment from the national committees maybe last week. So we received over 200 comments on the national committees, but this is half of the comment on the CD1. So good. So we try to check these critical points and remove the barrier to understand something. So most difficult point is the distinction between emission reduction and avoided emission. This is really confusing, but actually, so this point should be clarified in the next draft. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then, Uehara-san, you are one of the person who is waiting for the standardization of avoided emissions. Could you give your comments?
Okay, thank you. So I think the avoided emission need to be fair and comparable, as the Jason-san pointed out. So the Hiroshima G7 communique, as you know, included the goal of promoting investment from the financial sector by appropriately valuing companies and the solutions that contribute to society's GHG emission reduction. So I'd like to introduce the Japanese, the GX Week activity. At the GX Week, now we are trying to put together 2 case studies to embody this. One is listing case studies on how financial institutions can use the avoided emission. The second is listing case studies on how to calculate the avoided emission of products and services. At this moment, there are big fluctuations of avoided emission calculation and numbers. So as the disclosure of emission reduction contribution that progresses in the future, fairness and ease of comparison must be ensured so that it can become a common measure for the society. We hope that the GX League list of case studies will help financial institutions make more use of the avoided emission as an opportunity indicator of climate change in their investment decisions. In addition, expanding the use of avoided emission in other industries is very important to accelerate the decarbonization of society. In the process, it is desirable to have standardized assessment method within the same industry. So same industry need to have the common methodology for calculating the avoided emission, and it will be comparable. For example, electric and electronics industry, now we are trying to accelerate to establish the common standardization by attaching assessment cases in the annex of IEC international standard, as Hill-san mentioned. WBCSD is also conducting the case study. So the case study at this moment is very helpful to have the same understanding and to have the common the methodologies. I believe the establishment of common assessment method and ease of comparison within the same industry will be essential for the penetration of the reduction contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, we recognize that this is a very hard question, and there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. But again, I think we need to have hope, because it wasn't just a few years ago that everyone was worried about how do we get scope 1 and 2 emissions even. And there was a big hoo-ha about, how do we measure these things and disclose them? And it has basically come together. And why is that? Is because the market and society as well has come to see, emissions as a risk factor, as an opportunity, as a risk to be priced. And when there is that kind of fundamental driver, of investment markets and markets to price things, I think that the demand will come and we will figure this out. And I do believe that, if you believe that, supply chain emissions and accounting for the total cost of these technologies and these solutions is important and is important for investment returns, then the demand will come. And so please, I encourage you to, get the data right, get it consistent so we can use it just as another indicator in our financial decision-making process.
Thank you. And in addition to that, I have one question. Hiruta-san and then also Uehara-san said that making standardization within the industry. And then I know that currently, for example, electricity and electronics through IEC, you have the standard. You will have a standard by 2024, I guess. But looking at financial data, there is no distinction among the industry. So we can compare electricity companies and then also other industry. Of course, when we say as a financial institution, of course, we compare the companies within the industry. But which industry do we need to focus on? We have the common data or common thought as well. So if we divide too much by each through industries, then how can we compare each industry? Which industry is contributing to solution as a solution provider? Jason, what do you think?
Well, again, I think that we need to, we always try to keep a view of, what is the key driver of the price in the market? What is the key driver that's going to affect how investors allocate capital? So, I agree with you that we shouldn't get kind of too bogged down by tiny details, even though as the experts in the field, that's kind of maybe your comfortable place to start from. But we do need to be able to, again, be able to take this data and consistently assess not just for for electronic makers as well as water companies with the kind of ideally the same type of data and metric, so we can compare across. Again, so what we're trying to do, keep the end in mind, is to try to find what is the lowest cost, i.e. the most profitable opportunity to avoid that emission, that marginal emission. And if we have the data that can do that across the board, I think the rest of the pieces will fall into place. Just quickly say, that's a great example of how we need to really think about the, the total costs and the total opportunity set here. As you mentioned, starting up a new project like that is going to entail more emissions. If we're just thinking about an emissions reduction perspective, you may not want to go ahead with that investment, or you may not want to go ahead with that project, and we'd all be worse off for it. So I think that's why it really illustrates why this avoided emissions metric approach and data is going to be so important for us to allocate the capital efficiently and really make sure that those projects are getting done.
Thank you. I think we still have many things to do more for establishing this approach, but it will be very beneficial for financial industries, and then maybe it may take some time, but also financial companies should be also creative or thoughtful how we use this data and then also disclosure. Okay, so let's move on to Q&A session. We still have more than 10 minutes, and then could you raise the audience to the hall, to the audience? Do you have any questions or comments? If you have any questions, please raise your hands. Any question would be fine. Please, thank you. And then also I would appreciate you make questions in English because there is no translation system for Philip.
Thank you very much. I'm Wataru Takahama, Director of METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. So, avoided emission. So, even though we agreed on the avoided emission G7 meeting, it's honestly say it is not popular like GHG protocol, scope 1, 2, 3. How can we be like the scope 1, 2, 3? Still, avoided emission is not popular among the world, it's honestly said. So how can we do? We need the advice.
Even scope 3 is not so popular among corporate sectors. It's so difficult to calculate. But yeah, and then again, misuse of avoided emission and the no clear distinction between GHG protocol and an avoided emission will make things more complicated and confusing. So yeah, it's a great question. And then of course we have, METI has done a great job to promote this concept through G7 or other big conferences, including this one. But what can we do further? Okay, no strict rule for the order. Do you want to start, Hirta-san?
Thank you very much, Reiko-san. So actually, so as I said, so we have to accelerate and promote mutual understanding of avoided emission idea among the all industries. Actually, so as our electronic products are composed of the chemical products and the electrical components, and so go to the upstream, there are so many industries are included. So these stakeholders should be invited to share the information and the latest activities of the avoided emission, because so our purpose is one, so we would like to accelerate CO2 emission reduction. So this useful information should be shared and how to say, more understandable in the market widely. So the communication and such kind of place to the discussion is important to accelerate the dissemination of the avoided emission idea. That's my idea. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Uehara-san, you explained that Panasonic has already disclosed avoided emissions. And then could you share what kind of comments you have received after publishment, or any positive one or negative one or very silent? What was that?
Okay, thank you.
Honesty.
Yeah, so at this moment, so we don't receive the negative word or the negative message from the market. Honestly speaking, we receive the positive message, because we disclose the avoided emission. At this moment, the biggest number will come from our EV battery business, as well as the heat pump business. So those two business, now we are growing in the market, and there's opportunity to grow. And also we will be able to contribute to reduce the emission reduction. So as everyone knows, so today is the TCFD Summit day as well. And the TCFD requires us to disclose the risk and opportunity. So the risk side, we always disclose our emission by using the GHG protocol. But on the other hand, opportunity side, at this moment, there's no indicator, or it is difficult to explain the opportunity. So we believe avoided emission is one of the candidates to explain our opportunity or the positive activity to realize the decarbonization. So every company or industry, I believe, so everyone had the opportunity to disclose by using the avoided emissions. But on the other hand, unfortunately, at this moment, there's no standards, as I mentioned. So now the electronics industry, now we're trying to have proceed to establish the common standardizations of avoided emissions. That is the first step. And also, together with a company in this industry, each company try to disclose their avoided emission by using the current guidance, which is the GX League and the WBCSD, and also the as well as the discussion in the IEC. So if the company who disclose the avoided emission are increasing, I think the avoided emission will be popular.
What can you do as a financial institution,
Well,
Jason?
I think that the points have been made very, very eloquently, and I would just add that as investors, and I think for the market trust, we need data that's consistent, data that is comprehensive, so we can compare, and also data that's conservative, so that we can avoid accusations of greenwashing. But really, I would encourage people to think, step back and say, okay, again, give a positive vision of the world. It's not accepted today as much as Scope 3, but does this actually solve a problem that we face today? I think we do. I think it does. Sustainable investing, the net zero is facing a lot of challenges today. We've reached the point of adaptation of some of these technologies where a lot of new costs and pushback is starting to show up. That is a fact. That is a reality. So I think in order to keep making progress, we need to think, what do we need to do in order to keep finding those opportunities, keep finding that low-cost line, so we can keep investing and keep pushing this through in a realistic and objective way. That's what we can deliver with this.
Thank you very much for your powerful message. And going back to today's theme, solution provider and then avoided emissions. And then we sometimes think about decarbonization is very important, and then we agree on that. But sometimes we think it as a cost or risk, but sometimes we forget about that these initiatives are opportunities for making money or and then growth. And then also, most important thing is to deliver our globe, our planet, to be better for the future generation. And then we can't forget about this basic mission. Why are we doing this? And then also, we can deliver the great planet to the next generation, and we can make money as well. This is also very important in this society. So with that, we have another 5 minutes, but let's take 1 minute for each panelist to make final message to the audience. Okay, shall we start from who is going to raise your hand? Uehara-san, maybe you have already explained a lot, but final message.
Okay, thank you. So I'm from Panasonic, so we'll continue to disclose our avoided emission as a sign that we are accelerating the business transformation and growth. That is a key message. Of course, we will contribute. We believe we contribute to the decarbonization society.
Thank you, Reiko-san. So as a final message, I'd like to say, so actually we are a solution provider, but actually we need a market. So how much the country or company and the individuals would like to have the solution to reduce CO2 emission. So the avoided emission is a helpful information. So I'd like to say the governmental support to such kind of cultivate these consumer actions to purchase such kind of good solution to reduce the CO2 emission through the avoided emissions concept. Thank you.
I would just say, let's keep our eyes on the goal here. Is this something that is really going to add value? Is this something that is solving a real problem in the world? If so, let's be brave. Let's push ahead. Let's be consistent and conservative in the valuation. But the market and the economy and society will respond if this is a real issue that we're trying to solve. If this is the best opportunity and the best way to do it, then it will gain acceptance, I think.
Thank you very much. And then again, to achieve this goal, we need collaboration not only in financial industry, but also private companies and then government. We need to work together, not only in Japan, but across the globe. That's my final message. And thank you very much again, the panelists. Thank you.